business. He's an analyst, an attorney, author, actor, and other A words. You know, like advocate. What did you think I meant? You think I'm playing about him being an actor? I'm not. This dude starred in an episode of The White Shadow in a shower scene, and he made it look good. You may know him as the guy who calls BS on the NCAA, and it sounds all smart because, like I said before, he's a freaking attorney. Now, introducing the only Dookie that everyone actually likes, Jay Bilas.
No reason to do anything else other than bring Jay Bilas in. His time is valuable. And as always, we appreciate him condescending to be on the show. Jay, overall this week, a rough week for college basketball. Are you discouraged or encouraged by not what happened, but by what this might mean going forward?
Neither. I don't think, even though this is a really painful period right now, it, in my judgment, is different only in the federal government is involved. Other than that, it's just the latest scandal.
Yeah.
The NCAA was born in scandal in 1905, and it's operated in scandal ever since, and we have scandal after scandal. So this is our latest. We'll get through it, and it'll be business as usual. They're not going to stop the games. They're not going to give the money back.
Right.
They're going to keep playing, and then we'll have another one of these in a period of years, and we'll go through it again.
Well, but that kind of sounds like, in some sense, based on how I know you feel about the NCAA, how I feel about the NCAA, that's kind of a defeatist attitude of nothing's ever going to change. Surely something will come out of this that's positive for college basketball or college sports in general.
Well, the only thing positive that could come out of it is if the enterprise admits what it is. I have a good friend named Chris Spatola who likened, sort of this whole thing to prohibition. And, the idea that people were going to stop drinking during prohibition was a fantasy land, and it was a myth. And all it did was drive everything underground and create a black market economy. And, just even with agents, like the idea that if you keep a player from having an agent, and from getting advice from an agent and having somebody, an agent represent you. I have an agent. I've had an agent ever since I graduated college.
Right.
I had one I had a theatrical agent. I had a basketball agent. I have a broadcast agent. And, it's funny when things are above board and you have a contract and everything, I pay my agent.
Yep.
My agent didn't pay me.
Right.
But when it's a black market underground economy where you're trying, the agents are trying to get their hooks into guys, you have all the ethical agents stay on the sidelines while the unethical agents have open field running. It's kind of like, people may take this the wrong way, but it's kind of like when abortion was illegal.
Yeah.
The ethical doctors wouldn't perform an operation that people were seeking.
Yep.
And so they went back alley, and it was certainly not healthy for anyone involved. Take the moral side of it away.
Right.
So it's the same kind of analysis in this that. I don't condone breaking rules, and I certainly don't condone breaking laws.
Right.
Absolutely. It strains my mind to understand how these things were crimes.
But
when you have, you had unethical behavior here, and we know that's true because they have wiretaps and the like. But you have unethical behavior in an immoral system, and it's hard to get your undies in a bunch over too much of this.
Jay, you brought up your confusion with it. Even as this whole news was breaking this week, I found myself wondering, what actually is the law that they're breaking? And Cameron explained a little bit over the break, but could you just explain sort of what this actually means? Because I think a lot of people are actually confused as to why the FBI is investigating this and not the NCAA.
Yeah, there are a few things involved. One, this all came out of the Southern District of New York, the U.S. Attorney's Office, which is if not the most powerful, it's one of the most powerful in the country. And the Southern District of New York has had some issues over the past few years, and so it kind of needed a win, and it needed something positive. And I'm not a fan of this, where the U.S. Attorney's Office anywhere, let alone the Southern District, has a press conference to announce a prosecution. I don't think that public servants and prosecutors should be having press conferences. And they certainly shouldn't be having press conferences just when they file charges.
Yeah.
If you win something, maybe then I get it, but not when you file charges. Those are grandstanding moves and publicity-seeking moves. it's not to say they're bad people or they have bad motives or anything, because there are reasons to do that if you want to throw scare into people and all that.
Yeah.
But, it's one of these drugs on the table things, or where, look what we've done, look at all the drugs we found, and it makes no dent in the war on drugs.
Right.
It's just a grandstanding move. But really, the theory of this is that because these schools take federal funds over $10,000, this gives federal jurisdiction. So, in theory, when you have a coach and in this case the shoe company executives and maybe an agent and all that, and the player or a player's family essentially conspire to break NCAA rules, the school can suffer economic harm by having to disgorge profits, and they could be put on probation and lose money and the like. And they lose control over their assets, being the player and the scholarship they're giving the player. So the player is seen as property here, and the victim is the school. And that's a hard one to swallow here. That's a really difficult one. We say, oh my, the school who hired the bad actor and who is benefiting from the player is somehow the victim here. And then there's another part of it where you've got the assistant coaches who took money to make an introduction to an agent and essentially steer the player to the agent. In legitimate business, that's called a headhunter. But the fact that it wasn't disclosed that money was taken and it's not legit advice, I can understand that one a little bit more. The school is victim thing, I actually don't think that's a crime. And but U.S. attorneys' offices basically, I mean, you ask any lawyer, they can basically do whatever they want. Yeah. It's really hard to convince any judge or any court that somehow the U.S. attorney doesn't have jurisdiction.
Let's get to this, Jay, because obviously there were two different crimes that they are investigating or that they are filing charges of. It's like you mentioned, the buying of assistant coaches in a sense to agencies to steer players towards them, and then we've got the other part, which has certainly affected the state of Kentucky this week with Coach Pitino being dismissed at the University of Louisville. I am under the impression, I've been told by basically 3 Division I coaches over the last 20 years, that this kind of thing goes on all the time. Is that your impression of college basketball, or do you feel like this is a rare thing where this particular coach happened to be caught?
Well, one part of it happens all the time, or at least I believe it does. I don't have firsthand knowledge of it. Yep. It's kind of like mortgage fraud in banking. I mean, I know it happens. I know there are phony appraisals out there, and people submit false applications, and they get loans based on false pretenses, but the loans perform and everything works out. It's still mortgage fraud. I just don't know all the instances it's happening.
Right.
I know this is happening. I know that you've got people that are paying into 501c3 corporations on the grassroots level, sort of what's called AAU basketball, and money's being funneled that way. But I did not understand or have much knowledge of sort of assistant coaches taking money from agents in order to make introductions and the like. That strikes me as, because there's nothing wrong with an assistant or any coach or anybody giving advice, making an introduction or giving advice. That's fine. It's just the exchange of money and sort of the kind of the fraudulent nature of it and the bribery part of it that's a bad thing. The other part, as far as the money changing hands, I don't condone breaking the rules. I think you should endeavor to change the rules.
Yes,
but the idea that we're going to run this multi-billion-dollar business and we're going to stop the flow of money is laughable, and that's why I say that this isn't going to stop. It's going to happen again. When Cameron, I'm older than you, but when we were in school, that was the good old days of cheating, when the player actually got the money.
Right.
And now the player doesn't get the money. It's the people around the player. Everybody but the player gets the money. And, sometimes the player has no say, may not even know that there's money changing hands. He's just being told what to do. It's a corrupt enterprise in its formation. It's an immoral enterprise.
From the very beginning.
You cannot make billions of dollars off of the service name, likeness of the players, and then keep the players from making anything themselves and claim somehow some sort of moral high ground.
Yep.
Like this is, and so shockingly, there's corruption around it. It's not hard to fathom.
Jay, do you think that something like this will actually see a change in that? Like, do you think that maybe the NCAA will see a scandal like this and maybe think, well, maybe it's time to start considering the fact that maybe we should pay these athletes?
No, they're not going to do that.
Yeah.
They're only going to be made to do that and forced to. And look, I love Jim Delaney. I mean, I have the utmost respect for him. But when you take a $20 million bonus from your conference, and then you say that the athletes get plenty and they're not exploited, and boy, look at all these things we're doing for them. I mean, I almost laugh when people talk about what athletes get.
Right.
They'll say, look what they get.
Yep.
They get a free education, and they get gear, and they get the best facilities, and they get this great opportunity to hone their skills, and maybe someday they can move on to be to play in the NBA. And I laugh at that, saying, hey, they get their expenses. And this is not some benevolent gift, but look what the schools get. Mm-hmm. They get the services of these players for expenses only. And, they get their names and likenesses that they get to sell for billions of dollars without having to bargain for it in any way, shape, or form, and they keep it in perpetuity.
Yep.
So who gets the better deal there? And coaches get gear,
yeah,
and coaches get to work in these great facilities. And could you imagine if we told the coaches, hey, listen, we're going to give you your expenses, but you get enough because you get to work in the best facilities in the country, and you get to work with the finest young players, and you can hone your skills that maybe someday you can move on and coach in the NBA.
What a gift.
That'd be ludicrous. They'd go, what are you kidding me? You're making billions of dollars. You're going to pay me my fair market value.
There we go.
And it just strains, again, it strains the mind and becomes laughable when you hear these things. And my thing is look, if it's such a great deal, let it stand on its own in the marketplace.
There we go.
Each entity each entity being each school,
yep.
They have 30,000 employees each. They know exactly what to pay each person. They can determine what to pay their athletes. And if they don't want to pay, don't pay. It's not the athlete's choice. They say to the athlete, well, you have a choice. Nobody's forcing you to play
right.
that.
That's the best argument they have.
You can go overseas, or you can quit. And nobody says to the schools, well, hey, if you don't want to pay, then go in Division III or go in Division II or try to compete in Division I without paying. But you have the right to pay if you want to. You're allowed to pay. And all these schools with all their employees, they know exactly who to recruit. They know exactly who to put in the game when they want to win. They know who to pay, and they can figure it out. It's not that hard.
Jay, if you want to know more about this, Jay, you were featured prominently in a fantastic documentary, folks. And this is where I've always felt the same way. Everything he's saying, because as a former player, I saw it firsthand. But for a lot of people on the outside, it's difficult for you to conceive this because it's how we've always done it. But there's a documentary called Schooled that Jay was featured in prominently and fantastically. I don't know where you can find it, but just Google Schooled and just watch it. And my favorite part of Schooled, Jay, is this one vice president of the NCAA who they're asking him, why are these student athletes amateurs? And the answer is, well, because we don't pay them. Well, so the follow-up question to that is, well, why don't you pay them? Because they're amateurs. And it's that kind of ridiculous circular logic that says, you don't have an answer, do you? This is just, we've always done it this way. We're not going to change it. And now there's billions and billions of dollars coming into this industry, and they're just keeping it for themselves instead of paying those that are working the butt off for it. And by the way, it's always, well, if it's free education so good, why aren't the professors getting a free education? Why isn't the president of the university getting a free education and payment for what they do for the university? I mean, they're basic arguments, but they're just so frustrating. And cannot thank you enough for coming on and voicing it again, because this is why I love listening to you talk, Jay. You're obviously, being a Dookie, that's fine and all well and good, but you're an attorney who knows what you're talking about too. So thanks, buddy.
Well, I appreciate being with you guys. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. Jay Bilas, the one and only, and as we said in the introduction, the only Dookie that everybody loves. And you know what? And this is what I love about Jay is truly a Duke fan. He's a Krzyzewski fan. He loves his school the way I love my school, but he doesn't get on ESPN and talk only about how great Duke is. Some of the Dukies on ESPN do. They kind of skew towards Duke, where Jay has talked about the greatness of Kentucky basketball for years. Since Calipari got here, he has talked about what what Kentucky has done, how fantastic Kentucky is, what that Calipari is doing has been unprecedented on many levels, and that's why I love Jay. Is I will listen to Jay talk all day long, not only because he and I see eye to eye on the paying of student athletes, as Max would say earlier, calling them student athletes, but Jay sees the logic and the illogicalness of what the NCAA is doing, and it is, folks. Watch the movie Schooled. I will have exactly what it's called, the subtitle for you when we get back from the break, but watch this movie and watch. It's just a documentary about these student athletes who are not paid their fair market value for what they do. And as Jay brought up, we didn't talk a whole lot about they're not even allowed to profit off of their own likeness. But somebody is. It's called the university. The university is allowed to profit off the likenesses of their players. The NCAA is allowed to profit off the likenesses of their players. There was a game called not NBA 2K, NCAA 2K, right? Isn't that what it was, Garrett?
Yeah.
Okay, they used my likeness and the likeness of my teammates. Okay, their game came out in the 2000s. But they went back and they had old school national championship teams, of which I was a part of too. And guess what, folks? There was a blonde or brownish hair, number 21, 6'3", 190 pounds, back then, shooting guard who got in the game off the bench for the Kentucky Wildcats and could only shoot threes. Who do you think that was? It was me. And if it wasn't for Ed O'Bannon suing the NCAA and suing the video game company and fighting for our likeness, I finally got a check for like $900. $900 because someone, without my permission, used my likeness in a video game. And you know what? Hopefully my teammates did as well. I had to follow up, and I had to make sure I was a part of this class action lawsuit, and I finally got paid $900 because video game made billions of dollars off of my likeness and the likeness of other college basketball players and college football players just by using the same color hair, designing the number around us, what our tendencies were in a game. I couldn't, by the way, the 21 in that game couldn't play defense either. You tell me who that was. It was me. Thank you. Unbelievable. All right. Thanks to Jay Bilas. We'll be right